ගරු කබීර් හෂිම් මැතිතුමා ඔබතුමාට මිනිත්තු 15ක් කාලයක් තියෙනවා.
මං හිතුවා 17ක් කියලා.
15යි. 12යි අලුතෙන් එකතු වෙලා තියෙන 5.
12යි 5යි 17යි. 17. Thank you. නියෝජක කතානායකතුමනි ස්තුතියි ශයාන් සේමසිංහ ඇමතුමා කතා කරද්දී එතුමා මූල්‍ය විනය ආරක්ෂා කිරීම සහ මූල්‍ය කටයුතු ගැන විනිවිධභාවයෙන් කටයුතු කිරීම සඳහා දිගින් දිගටම ප්‍රකාශ කරා. ඒකට සතුටු වෙනවා ඒ ප්‍රකාශය. හැබැයි රජයේ ප්‍රශ්නය තියෙන්නේ රජය කියන එකයි රජය ගේන නීති රීති පද්ධතියත් එක්කයි රජය ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමේ රටාවයි අතර ලොකු පරස්පරයක් තියෙනවා. එනිසා මේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ අයවැය මේ කාර්යාලය පිළිබඳව මාතෘකාවටම පිවිසෙන්න ඉස්සර මම වෙනත් වැදගත් කාරණාවක් ගැන කතා කරන්න කැමති. මම මේක කලිනුත් මාධ්‍යයේ කතා කරා. අද චන්දිම වීරක්කොඩි මන්ත්‍රීතුමාත් මේ සභාවේ මේ ප්‍රශ්නය ඇහුවා. මේක ඉතා වැදගත්. මොකද මේ අපි නීති රීති සහ මූල්‍ය විනය ගැන කතා කරනකොට මේකත් වැදගත් ප්‍රශ්නයක්. I wish to place this question before the Honourable Acting Minister of Finance. I would like to address the recent announcements made at the Colombo Stock Exchange with regard to the People's Leasing Company and their plans to acquire a 33% stake in First Capital Holdings. This acquisition has raised significant concerns and questions about the investment rationale and the structuring of the transaction. Honourable Deputy Speaker, at a time when people are taking a lot of beating, when there's a lot of hardship, and the government is imposing restrictions on the people, how the government conducts itself in being transparent in its activities is imperative, it's important. So therefore I'm raising this question, not with any malice. First and foremost, it is important to note that Janashakti Limited currently holds an 83% stake in First Capital Holdings PLC. With People's Leasing Company's acquisition of a 33% stake, Janashakti Limited will retain a controlling stake of 50% in First Capital Holdings. This leads us to the question why People's Leasing has chosen to acquire a 33% stake and trigger a mandatory offer. First impressions raise doubts whether the mandatory offer was triggered to provide exit liquidity to Janashakti Limited shareholders. By triggering the mandatory offer, People's Leasing stakes in First Capital Holding is likely to increase to around 40%, resulting in an increased cash outlay closer to Rupees 5.5 billion. This raises concerns about the investment rationale behind purchasing a 33% stake and requires further clarification. Given this, I would like to raise the following questions from the Honourable Acting Minister of Finance. One, is it People's Leasing Company's board's intention to increase this stake to over 50% and make First Capital Holding a subsidiary of People's Leasing Company? If so, are there any provisions for the purchase of additional First Capital Holding shares in the future? This House needs to know. Is there a call option with a pre-agreed price to facilitate this arrangement? People's Leasing Company's owning company, People's Bank, has a primary dealership. So how will this transaction add value? Number two, considering the current government policy of restructuring and divesting holdings in state-owned enterprises, it is essential to understand why People's Leasing is deviating from this policy. This deviation requires justification and clarification from PLC's board. Number three, when due diligence was done, were there any concerns raised regarding First Capital Holdings' exposure to treasury bonds and treasury bills given the yet to be finalized domestic debt optimization framework? How was the potential financial impact of domestic debt optimization on First Capital Holdings accounted for? If domestic debt optimization affects First Capital's profitability, will the purchase consideration paid by People's Leasing Company to First Capital Holdings be subject to variation? Why is the transaction being carried out prior to the finalization of the domestic debt optimization framework? Would it not be prudent to wait until the framework is finalized to eliminate uncertainty regarding the financial impacts? 4, to assess the risks associated with First Capital Holdings, treasury bills and bond portfolio, it is crucial to understand the scenario analysis conducted and reviewed by People's Leasing Companies Board. Have they thoroughly considered the possibility of maturity extensions and coupon reductions on these holdings? If so, we request further details to be provided to this Honourable Parliament. Consider number 5, considering the potential financial implications of domestic debt optimization on both PLC and People's Bank, it is essential to inquire whether scenario analysis has been performed to determine if these institutions require a capital infusion to meet the minimum capital adequacy requirement. Number 6, lastly, given the current negative credit growth and the potential for increased private sector credit growth when interest rates decrease and economic activity improves, wouldn't it be wise for the People's Leasing Company management to retain their current excess liquidity instead of utilizing it for the acquisition of a minority stake in First Capital Holding? This approach would ensure the maintenance of capital adequacy requirements post DDO and provide the necessary funding to facilitate credit growth in the second half of 2023 when economic activity picks up again. In conclusion, the acquisition of a 33% in First Capital Holdings by People's Leasing raises legitimate concerns regarding the investment rationale, structure of the transaction and the potential financial implications arising from the domestic debt optimization process. I urge the Honourable Minister to provide answers to Parliament on these questions and to ensure transparency in the decision-making process. Safeguarding the financial stability of state-owned enterprises and protecting public funds must be our utmost priority. Honourable Deputy Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Office bill has been long overdue, long outstanding. And actually, it's a great victory for the people in the Aragalaya who spoke about wanting new systems and new tools that would ensure more transparency and accountability. So we are happy that the government has brought this. We thank His Excellency the President for pushing it forward. The role of the legislature is, the problem is, Honourable Minister, you spoke about accountability and all, but there is a big difference between the laws you all bring and the way you all act. That's our main problem. The opposition, you said, does some baseless allegations. Our allegations are not baseless. We are giving you proof. The problem is you don't give sufficient answers. The role of this legislature is changing, with parliaments playing a more active role in budget matters, especially in developing countries. For promoting good governance and fiscal transparency, the legislature's active engagement in the budget process becomes essential. I would like to recommend that in addition to the Parliamentary Budget Office providing budget analysis, independent advice to parliamentarians, policy costing to party leaders and MPs, and that they also focus on the following. As you said, you all will add it up in the rules and regulations. It would be good for the Parliamentary Budget Office to assist MPs to prepare and indulge in a pre-budget discussion sufficiently early before the budget itself, so that they are engaged in the budget process. And secondly, our practice in Sri Lanka has been for the Ministry of Finance to submit a 3-year medium-term expenditure framework with the budget. I recommend that we propose a medium-term budgetary framework for 3 years to be submitted to the Parliamentary Budget Office with every budget, so that the MPs can look at the progress and the path ahead and how they can make necessary changes if it is necessary. The global scenario in all aspects, including government and politics, is changing. And if we as a country do not adopt modern tools and techniques, we will not be able to compete in our region with our neighbours. Governments are challenged to respond to urgent needs of citizens and to be more accountable to them. All over the world, public is putting up governments under heavy pressure and to show that they are providing good value for money and results. This is what we have to do as politicians. Governments and public sector need to modernize. There are new tools that are required to perform and achieve outcomes and goals and to get to results. Managing for development results is one such tool which has been used, which typically involves many phases, such as articulating and agreeing on objectives, selecting key performance indicators, setting targets, monitoring performances, and analyzing and reporting on results against targets. Countries like Malaysia have adopted performance-based budgeting years ago and have even moved to outcome-based budgeting. These are progressive steps that we need to take as a country. The concept of managing for development results has been adopted gradually in Sri Lanka since 1990s. But manufacturing for development results is a change management that emphasizes a shift in focus from inputs, activities, and outputs to outcomes and impacts. It promotes the concept of accountability for results. Management for development results is an essential aspect of good governance to improve development, efficiency and effectiveness, transparency, accountability, and informed decision making. Further, the government of Sri Lanka is a signatory to the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness in March 2005 and is committed to institutionalize management for development results government-wide. But sadly, in 2007 or 2008, the Rajapaksa regime scrapped the plan implementation ministry altogether, under which management for development results program was owned. The monitoring and evaluation framework for Sri Lanka that was being developed at that time was put on the back burner until today. These tools which we needed, which should have prevented this country from going bankrupt, were thrown aside in the Rajapaksa regime. Globally, monitoring and evaluation has expanded as a key tool of government with many users, such as decision-making, organizational learning, knowledge base, program improvement, policy development, impact outcome assessment, accountability, and performance audit itself. It is a powerful tool used widely by governments across the world. I am the chair of the Global Parliamentary Forum for Evaluation. We, in 2018, got 78 parliaments to come to Sri Lanka. We held an international conference, Eval Colombo, and we decided on the Colombo Declaration for every parliament globally to adopt evaluation as a policy, the national evaluation policy for each parliament. And our parliamentary forum, we established a national evaluation policy here in Sri Lanka and in many parliaments. In Nepal, in Philippines, in Kyrgyzstan, the Global Parliamentary Forum was involved in promoting that evaluation policy. In 2018, we had a select committee for monitoring and evaluation under the leadership of Deputy Speaker Ananda Kumarasiri, and we developed a draft national evaluation policy, which is now ready for presentation to the Parliament. Honourable Deputy Speaker, it is your duty also to push this. And I have urged the President to take this up at the Cabinet and to bring the bill to Parliament for approval. I have spoken to Honourable Shayan Semasinga. Honourable Minister, it will be a great honour when you bring it, the National Evaluation Policy, because it's a critical tool that we need to further account for transparency and accountability in this House. In 2018, we proposed to have a standing committee in Parliament for monitoring and evaluation. The purpose was for Parliament to engage with national development initiatives at its inception, during implementation, and after the completion of the initiative. Mid-end and post-evaluation provide opportunities to understand the progress of the initiatives and outcomes and lessons from the implementation of an initiative. Lessons learned from ongoing and post-initiatives provide valuable information to improve design of future interventions. Evaluations thus provide a means to engage at all times and all stages of a development intervention. It becomes a critical tool for us. In 2018, a few progressive MPs together who formed the Sri Lanka Parliamentary Forum for Evaluation proposed to set up a standing committee on monitoring and evaluation to bring the draft bill for national evaluation policy to Parliament. But today I believe we do not need a standing committee on evaluation. Instead, I propose to the Honourable Minister of Finance, the Acting Minister of Finance who's here, His Excellency the President, Honourable Shayan Semasinga, Honourable Ranjit Siambalapiri, and the Chair of the Committee of Public Finance, Dr. Harshadi Silva, to include a monitoring and evaluation unit within the Budget Office, what we are going to approve today, because then we will strengthen it. We will be able to make sure that we are achieving those targets we are talking about, what you mentioned, about transparency and about accountability. I can easily justify why this should be done. The monitoring and evaluation unit, why it should be there. A report that was submitted, a cabinet paper that was submitted by His Excellency the President in 2022. On the 18th of November, Honourable Minister, you would have seen this because you would have been in the cabinet. in this cabinet paper that is submitted, which was a report by the Department of Project Management. It was on the 18th of November 2022, where he shows that public projects that were initiated in this country since 2011, there have been 260 massive major public projects, out of which only 12% has been successful. 78% has been a failure. That is 30 projects successful, 230 projects a failure. These are mostly loan-funded projects, remember. And the public funds allocated for these projects was 5.8 trillion rupees. That means if you take 78% failure, that's over 4 trillion rupees of failed projects. Imagine the amount of money that would have been wasted. I will finish, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The Monitoring and Evaluation Unit in the Parliamentary Budget Office can review any ongoing public sector project or any new project proposals, and the Monitoring and Evaluation Unit could work with the Department of Project Management and Monitoring as partner or a secretariat, and could commission project evaluations, mid-term evaluations and post-evaluations, which could guide both Parliament and Cabinet on which public projects should be prioritised and which should be scrapped. So this is a very important thing. If we had had this process, I am sure the Southern Expressway from Matara to Mattala would have never been done, because that has no sense, doesn't make any economic sense, right? So this is how we wasted money. So in conclusion, I would suggest that we also focus on performance-based budgeting instead of line item budgeting. Performance-based budgeting is the allocation of funds based on programmatic results that contribute to organizational goals. Or in other words, for governments, performance-based budgeting uses evidence to maximize the allocation of funds towards programs that work and away from those that don't work. This should be the objective of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Thank you.
Honourable Kabir Hashim, on the points you brought, Honourable Kabir Hashim, on the points what you brought on papers leasing and finance, we will call for a report and we will explain the situation and according to the report. And also I told about the baseless allegations. I think you should not worry about that. I didn't mention your name. I mentioned who are responsible for those baseless allegations. And secondly, on the evaluation, draft what you were talking about, we have had informal discussions also. Upon arrival of the President, after he concludes his visit of France and UK, we will call for a meeting and we'll see how best we could accommodate that draft which has been done earlier. So we will have a discussion with the President when he returns back on that.
Thank you, Honourable